Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the civil war taking place inside of the former state of Ethiopia. And before I kind of get into the reporting and kind of what's going on today and kind of what we are finally learning as this renewed invasion of the northern Tirgray region continues by the despotic forces of Eritrea. We want to talk about the composition of forces prior to this renewed invasion kicking off. So we know that about 10 days ago, roughly, the Eritrean and Abiy loyalist forces launched this renewed operation into the Tigray region. And again, as we have talked about before, a lot of things are different now as opposed to what things look like in the end of 2020 when the first invasion took place. The first unsuccessful invasion took place that went into 2021 and finally saw the eviction of the Eritrean Army and the Abiy loyalist forces evicted from the Tigray region. But just as we look at, again, the force composition, the Eritrean military probably sets at around 200 to 300,000 personnel. They can probably push upwards to 400,000 with general mobilization, which appears to be taking place as we speak. Now, that force sounds like a relatively large force, which it is if you can compare and contrast to other African militaries. It is a very large force, and especially in terms of the size of the Eritrean population, which could be anywhere from 4 to 6 million people. We just don't really know at this point. The Abiy loyalist forces, some would say that the ENDF, the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, in conjunction with regional forces, Afar regional forces, Amharan regional forces, some Oromo regional forces, and then obviously the Ethiopian National Defense Forces itself, probably have a force anywhere from 500 to 600,000 personnel, given some of its mobilization efforts that have taken place over the course of the last year or two. Now, we do know that these two forces, meaning the Abiy loyalist forces and the Eritrean Army, really suffered a disaster, culminating in its eventual retreat from the Tigray region in 2021. And the Abiy loyalist forces, as we're watching what's happening on the ground right now, and even to a certain extent the Eritrean Army, really has not recovered from the initial disaster that took place, especially in the Tenbian region when the Eritrean Army tried to move south of Adwa and Axum and confront the Tigrayan Defense Forces in these mountainous redoubts. And we know now that those forces of both the Eritrean Army and the Abiy loyalist forces were defeated in the central Tigray region and eventually were chased out of the Tigray region, resulting in the counter-invasion by the Tigrayan Defense Forces. But both of these armies, meaning the Eritrean Army and the Abiy loyalist forces, glaringly have not recovered from that 2021 retreat from the Tigray region. And we're now kind of seeing just how poorly that military force, or these two military forces, have recouped from the disaster of 2021. And what we're hearing now is that essentially the Eritrean Army has been stopped along the northern Tigray region. Furthermore, Eritrean forces which were deployed into the Afar region, both near Abala in this area and further to the north near Berhale, have also faced significant setbacks in ongoing operations. Again, essentially, right now, the Eritrean Army has been, for all intents and purposes, as of right now, defeated by the Tigrayan Defense Forces. Uh, Now, what's different than what we saw in the first conflict? Well, as I talked about before, and I've mentioned this several times, the Tigrayan Defense Forces uh, were not mobilized in 2020, and that's why we saw that which you could only define as a fairly quick advance into the Tigray region by the Abiy loyalist and the Eritrean Army. This time it's a bit different. As I talked about in the previous episode, the Tigrayan Defense Forces now are numbering 200,000 plus forces, possibly upwards to 300,000. So fairly on par with what the Eritrean military has deployed. Now, the Eritrean military does have access to main battle tanks. Some would suggest anywhere from 200 to 300 uh, uh, prior Russian and Soviet-made main battle tanks, T-72s, T-62s, T-54, 55s, and relatively the same sort of force construct in regards to main battle tanks by the Abiy loyalist forces as well. But a lot of those tanks and armored fighting vehicles were destroyed in the earlier campaign. So we're not seeing the same sort of deployment of heavy armor as we saw in the earlier campaigns in 2020 going into 2021. A lot of those vehicles were either destroyed or broke down or abandoned in some of the ongoing battles that have taken place again back in 2020, 2021. So the level of heavy equipment being used outside the use of heavy artillery, we do believe the Eritreans, the Abiy loyalist forces, still are using plenty of heavy artillery, and we continue to see that in this ongoing conflict. But the ability for the Eritrean army to maneuver right now into the Tigray region and to penetrate Tigrayan forward lines right now is proving to be something that appears to be unattainable for the Eritrean military in conjunction with those commando divisions that were deployed in Eritrea to help support the Eritrean army. And again, the only area right now where we believe the Eritrean army has had any sort of success is near Shiraro here. And we anticipated that was going to happen. From Shiraro, it looked like that the Eritrean army would attempt, in conjunction with the Abiy loyal forces, which would try to move down towards Tirgray, and then Tirgray would be the gate eastward towards cities such as, again, Workro, Adigrat, Adwa, and so forth along the B30 highway. At the same time, if this would have been successful, the Eritrean army would have also deployed down towards the Rama and Zalambasa fronts as well, here in this locale, as they pushed east towards Axum, and that hasn't occurred. The Eritrean army's been stopped outside of Shiraro. They're well north of Tirgray right now, about 10 miles northwest of Tirgray, and continue to face very stiff resistance. And they haven't really pushed, meaning the Eritrean army, has not really even pushed into where you would see some of the most heaviest resistance, which would be the north-central Tigray region, again running from Tirgray in these towns, Axum, Adwa, Adigrat. Hasn't happened. And unfortunately for the Eritrean military and the loyalist forces, they look to be stuck, and they look to be, at least right now, to have been defeated in the field by the Tigrayan Defense Forces. It would appear that casualties have been significant. We've heard about some fairly significant casualties both in the Afar region near Abala and Berhale. We've also heard about very heavy casualties by the Eritrean Army being taken near Shiraro as well and north of Shire. And that's kind of where it sets right now. And it would appear that the Eritrean Army, at the onset of this operation, never established any sort of viable momentum. And it looks like they're stuck. And it looks like we could be seeing possibly some sort of Tigrayan Defense Force counterattack take place at some point in time. We do know, it appears right now at least, the Tigrayans are trying to conduct this win strategy where they're looking to defeat the Eritrean army first, prevent any sort of operation in the south in the direction towards southern Tirgray. And the Tigrayan Defense Forces did that by seizing first Kobo and then moving down and establishing defensive positions just to the north of Weldia, west of Kobo Robot, and and then further north towards, just south of Alamata, west of Alamata, and that's kind of the status quo that we're seeing with right now. We have seen some counterattacks taking place east of Lalibela by some Amhara regional forces, but it doesn't look like they are much ado in terms of any sort of successful operation that would look to cut off Tigrayan defense forces that are south of Kobo along the A2 highway, kind of in this direction. But we're going to continue to monitor that. And again, it looks like any sort of endeavor east of Mekele by the Eritrean army, which did move some forces into the Afar region, have been stopped. There was one report that indicated, and I believe the Tigrayan Defense Forces have acknowledged elements of approximately 5 Eritrean divisions. Now, when we say divisions, the reality is we're looking at something more or less the size of regiments or brigades. They're not the same sort of divisional structure that you would see with Western armies. So normally when you say 5 divisions in the West, you're talking about 60, 70,000 troops. But the Eritrean military just doesn't have the logistical infrastructure to maintain that sort of force construct in the Afar region. So they may have divisional headquarters deployed, so to speak, but actual forces deployed are probably not of that size in the Afar region. But again, right now, it looks like essentially, again, the Tigrayan Defense Forces have defeated the combined forces of the Eritrean military and the Abiy loyalist forces, both near Zalambasa, Rama, north of Axum in this area, and then obviously here near Shiraro as well. Again, the Eritrean force was looking to push from Shiraro onto Shire and then attack kind of Shire from multiple directions, and they weren't able to do that and have not been able to do that thus far. But that's kind of where we sit today as we continue to watch what is happening on the ground. I would suspect we could be on the precipice, possibly, of seeing some sort of Tigrayan counterattack in the north. I would not rule that out at this point, especially in terms of given the amount of casualties that the Eritrean military has sustained in recent days. In this ongoing operation. And from what we're hearing, morale is incredibly low. in the Eritrean military right now. They are not happy campers. They are not a well supplied force. They are probably not being fed nor watered in a proper manner, much less getting fuel to its forces that are fighting in northern Tigray. But we'll continue to monitor and see what is happening. And obviously, when we get information, we will absolutely bring you more content. But that's where we set for today. And as always, thanks for joining us. Have a good day.